So, stories to watch. We've got some rumblings about a soccer stadium being proposed for Baltimore, and this is one of the ones that I didn't go super deep in, and I was playing basketball at the Y last weekend or so when the headline broke, and I was talking to my friend Will, and I was like, yeah, that'd be cool, like to have a soccer stadium. And then you and I have our weekly one of our weekly meetings, and you kind of rain all over my parade. So what's the source of the shade on the stadium here, Andy?
Okay, so first of all, I would love it if we had professional soccer here in Baltimore. It would be great. And so there's a deal that Carmelo Anthony and the mayor and the state are trying to put together to bring a developmental league soccer team here to Baltimore. And it would be part of the DC United soccer franchise, which is the DC Major League Soccer team. It would be a minor league development team, a development league team that would have a soccer stadium that played in Carroll Park, Baltimore. And that stadium would have some stuff for schools and students and some soccer fields and all of that. I would love it if there was a soccer team here. I'd love it if there was a soccer stadium. Carroll Park may not be the best place to put it. It's a golf course right now, but it's a golf course. It's a publicly owned golf course, and it was one of the first places the Black Marylanders could play golf. So there's a lot of complicatedness about the location. But none of this is about really the location or about whether we want to have a soccer team and a soccer stadium here in Maryland. There's two things that it is about, though. The first thing is a theme that we've talked about a lot on this show, which is we should stop subsidizing wealthy people's sports franchises by giving them stadiums so that they can make the profit off of it. This is a pattern that we have in Maryland and we see in a lot of places. And one of the things that we've talked about with this is, wouldn't it be great if we had public ownership? Public ownership is hard in the big four sports because many of them have, at the major league level, many of them have antitrust exemptions or laws that protect them. Major League Soccer doesn't have that. But even beyond that, this is a minor league team for Major League Soccer. The price would not be very high. And in the same league, there's a team that Chattanooga, Tennessee has, and that team is publicly owned. It is owned by the fans, and the city has a role in it. So what you have there is a real good opportunity for Maryland to try out at a low price tag in a league that is welcoming to it, and in a place where we could afford it, to have a publicly owned or community owned football team, I think is the word that I'm supposed to use if I'm really enthused about this.
I think you're supposed to say football club.
Football club. Okay. Anyway, so we could have, instead of building a stadium for the wealthy owners of DC United, we could have Baltimore Public FC or something like that. And there's a great opportunity to do it here. It's a league that is open to it, and it is a sport that is open to it. So that's one thing. The second thing is, when I looked at the bill, this goes in the it's always worse when you look at the bill. Like, they used to say never read the comments. And sometimes I feel like legislators want to be like, never read the bill. Well, I read the bill in this case, and there is a part in the bill that talks about where the funding comes from. So we've talked about the blueprint for Maryland's future on this show, which is the multi-generational or the decade-long billions of dollar investment in Maryland's public education system. Well, part of that is funded by sports gambling revenue. So Maryland legalized sports gambling by a constitutional amendment. And when we did that, we said what we always say when we legalize some form of gambling: this money is going to go to education. Allow people to gamble from their phones and it will help fund our schools, they say, right? So that's been the way that it worked for a while. Last year, they started to inch their way into that. And in order to close the budget deficit, they allowed some of that sports gambling money to go to the general fund, but just for 1 year. But this bill inserts a clause that says that the $217 million bond that they are putting in to build the soccer stadium for the wealthy owners of DC United will be paid back with sports gambling revenue. The principal and interest on the bond will be paid back with sports gambling revenue before that money is allowed to go to the blueprint. So, and this is a while, like I had to read it a couple of times. I had to show it to some people. I had to like step away and come back. And I can't believe that this would possibly be the case, but I believe it is. So these bills have a hearing next Tuesday and next Thursday, and we're going to go talk about both of these things. We're going to talk about the opportunity to have publicly funded Baltimore Public FC, Baltimore FC Public, however they want to call it. And we're going to talk about the fact that if we're going to have a football club here for a minor league football club here in Baltimore, it shouldn't be funded with money that is allocated to go to public schools.
Yeah, so sports and sports politics maybe everywhere, but especially in Maryland. First they're buying horse farms that they end up not using and doing all kinds of shady stuff to the horses, and now they're trying to literally take money out of the school budget to build a stadium for
not just money out of the school budget, money that people are spending because they've been addicted to gambling by a state that doesn't want to raise taxes.
Yeah.
And the way that they sold that to us was, well, when we addict your children to gambling, we're going to give some of the money back to the schools that they went to, right? And now, Senator Antonio Hayes to Baltimore and the Senate is sponsoring this bill that if I'm reading it right, and I think I am, and if I'm not, I'm sure he and others will tell me that I'm reading it wrong and that I don't know how to read it, but I've read it 3 or 4 times and checked with some folks that should know. If I'm reading this bill right, it takes that gambling money, gives it to paying back the debt to build this wealthy person a stadium so that they can make money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so we should keep watching this, and make sure that they're not doing what's proposed in that bill, right? I mean, they can they can amend it, right? They can take that part out of it, and we could, debate it on the merits. But obviously, that is totally absurd and should not be moving forward.
Yeah.
The other story that I think is on a lot of people's minds these days that we're continuing to monitor and take action around is what's happening with the immigrant justice movement after the governor signed a bill proposed by the General Assembly to end these 287G agreements between county sheriffs in Maryland and ICE. And so, it seems like the pressure is starting to build. We're hearing all kinds of things. So what's kind of the timeline? And then we can kind of get into it a little bit more.
Yeah, so last week, Governor Moore signed a bill that banned the 287G agreements. There were 9 counties that had formalized cooperation between the county and ICE. And it was a big priority. People pushed hard for it. But I think we talked about this on the show last week. It is not the vast majority of the 3,500 or so immigration arrests in the state of Maryland in the last year. I think the number that I saw was 170 transfers from custody of these 9 counties via the 287G program. And that's really bad for the people who are involved in it. And it's really bad for the people who are afraid that would happen to them. But, it was not the vast majority of what was happening in that space. So it was a good thing that happened last week. But now the sheriffs immediately, like 2 days after Moore met, they went on Fox News, they went on the national news, and they said that while they're not going to legally challenge the bill, they're already devising a set of workarounds that they're going to use to continue to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. And so I think 23 out of the 24 counties have some form of informal cooperation on the books between their police and their correctional folks and ICE. So, that being said, there's also some the feds have decided to start targeting Maryland as a result of this. they're trying to put into place they've proposed several new immigrant detention facilities, one in Hyattsville, one in Hagerstown, one in Howard County that we've talked about, and we think that there's going to be more coming. We think this is a signal from them that they're planning on ramping up enforcement here. And the White House called Maryland and Westmore despicable for doing this, and they're starting to do that rhetoric ramp up that they did in Chicago and LA and Minnesota. And so I think that and Tom Homan threatened that Maryland was going to be the next place that gets the Minneapolis style flood. So
yeah, I think I read somewhere that the number of like detainee meals that they've ordered for, I don't know if they keep them in the freezer or something, has tripled, in the last week or something. So they're stockpiling, right? The writing's on the wall.
Yep. And, this is the way that they do it. The sheriffs are already on board with saying, well, now that you did this, they're going to have to come here. And the Republican candidates in some of those races are saying the same thing. Too bad that Westmore did this. Now they're going to have to come terrorize your communities, and it's Westmore's fault. Like, okay, that's going to be what they do. But I think what's important here is that the Community Trust Act, which is heard this week, in both the House and the Senate, begins to really start to do this process of closing some of those other gaps. So it expands prohibitions on law enforcement turning people over. It expands a prohibition on correctional facilities turning folks over. And it is part of a series of bills that I think help to protect other parts of the system now that the 287G agreements are done. I think these things have a good chance of passing. And so I think, we need to just kind of keep an eye on them, keep supporting them. We need to understand that in this context, the 287G agreements were important, but they can't be the entirety of our focus, because if they're the entirety of our focus, we're going to miss out on all the ways that they are already detaining people, deporting people, and terrorizing communities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, this is, we have to be ready. A friend who works in adult education like I do sent me a kind of resource and strategy packet that folks in Minnesota had put together. And this is kind of a good time to prepare for the worst, and hopefully it doesn't happen. But that's kind of the feeling that is out there right now.
Yep. And I want to say, there's a lot of Democrats who are starting to say some of the things that we've been saying: abolish these agreements, abolish ICE, restructure how we protect communities, restructure the way that these things work. But there's nobody in the governor's race, even if there's people in the General Assembly who are saying it, there's nobody in the governor's race who's even close to saying it. And I'll say even when Westmore signed the 287G agreement, he then the next day said, well, there's some wiggle room for some cooperation and things like that. So we need to keep the pressure up. We need to keep making sure that we're not putting all of our eggs in that basket, and that we're understanding the multiple ways that local government and state government are cooperating, allowing immigration enforcement, and put pressure on each of